The reading lamp was still on when Evelyn Hart vanished in downtown Seattle, Washington, population 540,000. The November night of 1974 arrived with cold rain and thick fog blanketing Lake Union. At 9:42 p.m., Evelyn's colleague Tom Reeves waved goodbye through the library window as the 22-year-old journalism student, wearing a gray coat and clutching a stack of notebooks, stepped outside. Evelyn said she'd stop by a coffee shop on Pike Street to finish an article for the student newspaper, then catch the last bus back to her dorm. Tom stood in the doorway, watching her figure blend into the rain, the streetlights reflecting on the wet pavement, creating trembling streaks of light. Evelyn's white canvas bag was the last thing seen that night. What happened in the minutes that followed would haunt Seattle for over 3 decades. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the latest cases. Seattle in 1974 was a city drenched in rain and fog, its streets around Lake Union perpetually damp, with trolley bus lights glinting off the slick asphalt. The distant sound of ship horns from the port mingled with the hum of machinery from factories along Elliott Bay. In that city, Evelyn Hart, a 22-year-old senior journalism student at the University of Washington, was living out the final months of her college years. She was calm, meticulous, and spent most of her time in the city library, where she worked evening shifts to cover school expenses. People often saw her leaving the building at closing time, clutching her notebooks and bag, walking briskly with her head slightly bowed to shield against the rain. That Monday night when she disappeared, Seattle was wetter than usual. Gusts from the lake blew hard, carrying mist and the smell of gasoline fumes. Evelyn left the library after her shift, carrying notes for an essay she was writing. A colleague recalled saying goodbye at the exit, seeing her wrap a scarf around her neck, pull up her coat collar, and turn onto a small street leading toward the bus stop. After that, no one saw her again. By dawn, Evelyn's dorm room remained untouched. The bed neatly made, the alarm clock set for 7 a.m., stacks of newspapers she'd collected piled on the desk. Her roommate thought she might have stayed late at the library, but a call there confirmed it had closed on time, and Evelyn had left with everyone else. All day she didn't show up to class, didn't call, and didn't appear at any of her usual haunts. By afternoon, her roommate, panicked, went to the student office to report Evelyn Hart missing. In Oregon, the Hart family received a call from Seattle. Evelyn's mother gripped the phone tightly, listening to the trembling voice of a dorm staff member, then joined her husband on an overnight bus along Interstate 5. They arrived in Seattle amid cold rain, stepped into their daughter's small room, and turned on the light. Everything was eerily still, the closet slightly ajar, notebooks, pens, photos of friends pinned to the wall. No signs of a hasty departure, nothing out of place. Everything was as it should be, except for its owner. That late afternoon, the Harts went to the nearest police station to report their daughter missing. The duty officer jotted a few lines in the logbook, asking them to return the next morning with more details. That night, the rain didn't let up, and the sound of ship horns echoing across Lake Union only deepened the unease settling over the couple. The next morning, when they returned, the case was officially opened. In the Seattle Police Department's duty room, the smell of bitter coffee and damp paper mingled as a file was opened with the heading "Missing Adult, Evelyn Hart." Detective Harold Cole, assigned to the University District, was tasked with the investigation. He was a calm man, accustomed to working in silence, his notebook always tucked with a pencil on its cover. Cole began by reviewing the family's account. Evelyn left the library in the evening, didn't return home. Her phone was unreachable, and there was no sign she took clothes or money. Her mother insisted. She never went anywhere without telling us first. Her father stayed silent, placing a student ID photo in front of Cole, her face smiling slightly toward the camera. After recording her personal details and her schedule from the last week, Cole visited the University of Washington dorms to inspect the scene. The small room was just as the family found it, the bed neatly made, the alarm clock turned off, notebooks and study materials stacked tidily. On the desk was a notebook with an unfinished introduction about the Rainier Road project, the article Evelyn was preparing for the student newspaper. Cole photographed the entire room, collected a list of her close friends, and asked the building security to show him the entry log from the night she disappeared. No unfamiliar names were recorded. Next, he went to the city library where Evelyn worked part-time. Staff confirmed she left the building at closing time, around 9 p.m. Showing no signs of worry or fatigue. One recalled her wrapping a scarf around her neck and tucking her bag under her coat as she stepped outside. No one knew which direction she took. Harold Cole compiled a list of potential witnesses in the area: bus drivers, gas station workers, and staff at the nearby coffee shop. He and two young officers walked along Pike Street, questioning every shop open that night. Most didn't remember much, but the coffee shop owner recalled a young woman sitting alone, writing in a notebook, leaving as the rain grew heavier. No one saw her after that. Cole filed a report that afternoon, noting, "No signs of voluntary departure. Likely something happened to the victim within an hour of leaving the library." That night, Cole proposed sealing off Evelyn's usual route to search for physical evidence and forming a search team around the Lake Union area, which she would have passed on her way back to the dorm. The request was sent to his superiors that night and approved the next morning. On the third day since Evelyn's disappearance, the search was officially expanded. Detective Harold Cole directly oversaw the plan to comb downtown and the route she typically walked home. The team included 11 officers, 2 K-9 units, and a group of student volunteers from the University of Washington. A map was spread out on a table in a temporary command post set up at the city library, with red dots marking places Evelyn might have passed that night. The library entrance, the coffee shop, the bus stop, and the residential path toward Lake Union. Each area was divided and assigned. The first group searched around the library, checking the parking lot and the staff smoking porch. The second scoured the bus stop and the path down to the lakefront. The third extended toward Gasworks Park. The rain had stopped, but the ground was still wet, and strong winds from the lake forced everyone to bundle up in raincoats, their steps heavy. Near noon, an officer patrolling the lakefront reported via radio that they'd found an item resembling a woman's bag near the railing of an iron bridge connecting to Fremont. Cole arrived immediately. The soaked canvas bag was caught between two railings, possibly washed there by the rain. He ordered it photographed, then, wearing gloves, opened it on site. Inside, everything was intact: a small leather wallet with her University of Washington student ID, personal documents bearing Evelyn Hart's name, a few coins, a ballpoint pen, and a green notebook. No signs of tampering or struggle. The notebook was carefully stored in a waterproof nylon bag, its writing still legible. Cole skimmed it, finding notes related to her article on the Rainier Road project. On one of the last pages was an incomplete, scratched-out line. "Need to confirm with Engineer Keene." He closed the notebook, sealed it in an evidence bag, and labeled it Exhibit 01. Around the bag's location, the ground was muddy and the grass tangled, with no fresh footprints, only faint shoe marks blurred by water. Officers expanded the search along the railing and water's edge, but found nothing more. A rescue boat checked the water below the bridge, with negative results. All they had was an abandoned bag and an unexplained void. Cole ordered a mock scene setup. If Evelyn had dropped the bag, it should have fallen toward the road, yet it was found inward, near the water, as if deliberately placed there. He noted, possible staged scene, intentional act not ruled out. That afternoon, the team continued searching the route from the library to the Fremont Bridge. A sanitation worker mentioned seeing the bag the previous day, but thought it was forgotten and didn't touch it. This pinned the bag's appearance to sometime after midnight. Police photographed the area, collected soil, hair, and fiber samples nearby, and sent them to the lab. In the office, Cole pinned a large map to the wall, marking the bag's location with a red pushpin, connecting the dots with string library, coffee shop, Fremont Bridge, dorm. The line stopped at Lake Union, where the bag was found. No bus routes ran through that area, and it wasn't a path Evelyn typically walked. Why she was there became the first question in the investigation report. That evening, a preliminary report was sent to the chief. Evelyn Hart's disappearance involves unusual elements. The victim didn't leave the city. Personal items were found intact. No signs of voluntary departure or robbery. Investigation should expand toward possible criminal activity. A new order was issued. Continue searching around Lake Union and the southern industrial area while checking records of vehicles in the area that night. Cole brought the evidence to storage, personally sealing and labeling it, writing in his notebook, "No signs of violence, but everything is too neat. Someone arranged this." The next morning, with Lake Union still shrouded in thick fog, the search team resumed under Detective Harold Cole's new orders. The scope expanded nearly a kilometer north, covering all of Gasworks Park and the old industrial land along the waterfront. The area was sparsely trafficked, the ground uneven, dotted with abandoned warehouses and small trash piles. Cole split the team, sending officers along the water's edge to mark checked areas with red paint. He and two forensic technicians, carrying a film camera and evidence bags, ventured deep into the brush near an old railway. The sky remained overcast, the lake's wind carrying damp air and the smell of rusted metal. Near noon, a young officer called out he'd found a piece of gray fabric caught on a steel fence near an abandoned railway. Cole approached, signaling to cordon off the area. The fabric was a torn piece of nylon raincoat, about 2 handspans wide, caked with dried mud. Wearing gloves, he used tweezers to place it on a white board, noting mud on the edges mixed with small grass fibers, suggesting it had been exposed for at least a few days. When he flipped it over, light revealed a silvery hair standing out against the damp fabric. Cole carefully extracted it with tweezers, placed it in a glass tube, and labeled it Exhibit 02. The fabric and hair were photographed, with wind direction and distance to the lake meticulously recorded. He ordered technicians to collect additional soil samples and measure the area's radius. Nearby, a rusted can and an old newspaper scrap were also collected, in case they were left at the same time. All evidence was sealed in waterproof bags and labeled with the case number. Back at the station, Cole requested the forensics lab to conduct preliminary tests. Under a microscope, the hair was coarse, with an intact root, silver gray, about 15 centimeters long. Compared to a sample from Evelyn's personal comb, it was ruled out entirely. The color and thickness didn't match. Forensics noted, sample likely from an older male, origin unidentified. The fabric was confirmed as waterproof nylon, common in locally made raincoats. Based on the tear and stretched edges, experts suggested it was forcibly pulled or caught on a sharp object as the wearer moved through the fence. The dried mud contained clay consistent with soil around Lake Union. Cole cross-referenced the map, noting the raincoat fragment was found less than half a kilometer from the bag's location. The two pieces of evidence likely tied to the same movement pattern. He began reconstructing the night Evelyn disappeared. The route from the library to Gasworks was one few walked, especially at night. If the bag was discarded near the Fremont Bridge and the raincoat fragment was found northeast of the lake, the victim may have been forced to move along the waterfront. Cole reported these findings to his superiors, requesting a list of everyone who might have encountered Evelyn in the 24 hours before her disappearance. The administrative team coordinated with the university, library, and city authorities to compile names, work schedules, and addresses of relevant individuals. The initial list included her roommate, 3 library colleagues, 2 academic advisors, and several people Evelyn interviewed for her student newspaper article. Among them stood out Arthur Keene, a project engineer for the Rainier Road, whom she'd met weeks earlier for information. Cole noted the name in his notebook, circling it in red but remaining cautious. He tasked an investigator with verifying the whereabouts of everyone on the list that night. The tech team also reviewed records of unresolved incidents around Lake Union that month for overlaps. A report came back by day's end. No assaults or robberies matched the time frame. On his desk, Cole spread out the newly developed film photos, the torn fabric, the hair, the bridge railing where the bag was found. The pieces were disjointed, but when arranged in order, a picture emerged, a journey cut short, starting at the library and ending by the quiet lake. In his fourth-day report, he wrote, "No direct evidence of violence found. However, collected evidence suggests the presence of at least one other person at the scene. Investigation direction, possible criminal activity involving stalking or abduction. Continue tracing the hare's owner." The next morning, Harold Cole met with the investigation team in a small second-floor room at the police station. On a whiteboard, he drew 3 columns: family, colleagues, and professional contacts. The goal was to identify everyone who had interacted with Evelyn in her final week. The initial list included library staff, her roommate, 2 academic advisors, and individuals she interviewed for the University Daily. Each name was entered into the system to verify identities and schedules. Cole aimed to rule out the possibility of Evelyn leaving voluntarily or having a dispute. He sent officers to re-interview each person. Her roommate Linda confirmed Evelyn had no boyfriend or conflicts. Her professors said she was a good student with no unusual behavior. Reviewing her notebook, they found a penciled list of names, numbered 3 from the City Transportation Department, including Arthur Keene, an engineer on the Rainier Road expansion project. A hasty note next to Keene's name read, "Need to verify budget details. Poor cooperation." This caught Cole's attention. He cross-checked the 1974 Transportation Department report, confirming Keene was indeed the engineer overseeing the area. The student newspaper's editorial board revealed Evelyn was working on an investigative series about cost overruns in public construction projects, having requested interviews with city technical staff. Her last draft was submitted 4 days before her disappearance. Cole compared timelines and noted Keene was supervising night shifts at the Rainier Road site, about 3 miles from where the bag was found, during the relevant time frame. He noted, subject potentially encountered the victim during the incident's time frame. In his report to superiors, Cole requested to question Keene to verify their professional relationship and obtain a hair sample for comparison. The request was denied. A response from the administrative office stated, "Arthur Keene is a contract employee of the Public Works Department. Any interaction requires legal department approval." Cole argued that verifying identity was routine, but the chief instructed him to hold off until specific city-level directives are issued. The internal legal unit was under scrutiny for budget issues, restricting actions involving department staff. A verbal order came down: no contact with technical personnel without evidence of a crime. This administrative interference frustrated Cole. Back in his office, he reviewed Keene's file. Male 31, resided in North Queen Anne, single, civil engineering graduate, clean work record, no criminal history. Nothing stood out except a personnel note. Previously reported for inappropriate behavior toward female staff, crossed out and stamped internally resolved. Cole set the file down, thought for a few minutes, then called a contact at Public Works for an off-the-record check. The brief call yielded vague details. Keene was reserved, often worked late, rarely socialized, and sometimes visited the construction site alone at night. No one knew much about his life, beyond the administrative address in his file. Meanwhile, the team checked the other 3 names on the interview list, but found no suspicious details. One was out of state during the incident. Thus, only Keene was confirmed in Seattle at the time. Cole recorded the findings, clipping them to the file. He knew waiting for approval would let the case go cold, but he couldn't overstep his authority. The following week, the team shifted focus to searching for new evidence. Each morning, Cole returned to the office, re-examining photos of the raincoat fragment and bag, comparing locations, angles, and wind direction. It remained a maze with no exit. By month's end, a summary report to the chief stated, "No new evidence or witnesses found. Request to question Arthur Keene not approved. Investigation suspended pending further orders." A red stamp marked the file, pending authorization. Cole closed his notebook, tucked his pen into his pocket, and sat silently, staring out the window. Rain began falling again on the damp rooftops and the map he'd pinned, where Arthur Keene sat quietly among unconnected red threads. After the request to question Arthur Keene was denied, the investigation stalled. Harold Cole kept a small team checking other possible leads, but nearly all came up empty. He had officers check every hospital in the city and surrounding counties, from Harborview to Swedish Medical Center. No facility admitted a female patient matching Evelyn Hart's description in the week following her disappearance. Local morgues had no records of unidentified persons fitting her profile. The team then expanded to train stations and hotels, considering the possibility she left the city in panic or was forced elsewhere. Passenger lists for trains, long-distance buses, and in-state flights were manually reviewed. No one named Evelyn Hart or matching her height, hair color, or age appeared. Hotels around downtown and the docks reported no guests with her identification. The investigation branched out, but ended in silence. By late month, Cole relied on public tips, most of which were inaccurate or contradictory. A taxi driver claimed he drove a brunette to Capitol Hill, but his shift didn't align with the timeline. A woman reported seeing someone resembling Evelyn with a middle-aged man near the ferry terminal, but her description didn't match. Each lead cost hours of verification, only to hit dead ends. Cole repeated the process: list, cross-check, eliminate, noting unverified in the margins. He increasingly sensed they were losing direction. Meanwhile, Seattle's December weather grew colder. Prolonged rain made outdoor searches futile. Grass along Lake Union was waterlogged, mud saturated, any traces long washed away. Police even deployed divers to check parts of the lake, but no body or suspicious items were found. Forensics reanalyzed the raincoat fragment samples, but beyond the unidentified silver hair, nothing new emerged. Soil and mud samples only confirmed the discovery site was around the lake, with no specific location pinpointed. The final lab report was brief. No definitive evidence of a crime from current exhibits. At the higher levels, budget and staffing pressures relegated Evelyn's case to low priority. Other city crimes, armed robberies, stabbings, consumed most resources. By mid-January 1975, Cole received an internal memo. The Evelyn Hart case would be closed if no progress was made within 2 weeks. He persisted, re-reviewing the file. The map on the wall still held its red pins, the connecting threads now sagging. On his desk, the raincoat fragment and bag sat sealed in evidence bags. Cole knew, if the case was shelved, they'd be stored indefinitely. He met with the chief, requesting a 1-month extension, but was told, no evidence, no suspects, no grounds to call it a crime. 3 days later, the official decision came: case status. Insufficient evidence to determine criminal act. The Evelyn Hart disappearance file was closed and archived. The evidence, bag, fabric, hair, soil, was packed into a cardboard box, sealed, and labeled #7448 in red marker. Harold Cole signed the seal's label on February 4, 1975. He lingered before placing the box on the third shelf from the entrance in the storage room. The cold room's fluorescent lights flickered, blending the smell of damp paper and rusted metal. On the inventory log, the final typed entry read, no body, no evidence of a crime, no suspects. Below, Cole's signature slanted thinly, like a knife's mark on paper. As he left the storage room, the iron door's clang echoed, cutting through the steady sound of rain outside. For the department, the case was closed. For him, it was an unresolved void. When the evidence room door closed, Evelyn Hart's disappearance became a number in the Seattle Police Department's unsolved case catalog. The box #7448 was shelved among hundreds, each holding its own story, but sharing the same fate. No truth found. The archive sat in the old basement of the headquarters, damp and rarely visited, except by inventory staff. Per policy, evidence was reviewed annually for statistics, otherwise left undisturbed. Evelyn's name faded from newspapers after a few months, then from the minds of those who didn't know her. For police, the case was referenced only when citing under-evidenced disappearances. Harold Cole occasionally passed the archive on basement errands. He knew exactly where box #7448 sat Last row, third shelf up. Sometimes he paused, eyeing the coded labels, then left without a word. By 1978, he was reassigned to another unit, no longer handling civil investigations. In 1982, Cole retired early, leaving Seattle with his old notebook and personal copies of Evelyn Hart's case files. Over time, others from the investigation left the force or passed away. The forensic technician, who handled the initial evidence, died in a 1981 car accident. The administrative lead transferred out of state. The two young search team officers returned to civilian life, and no one mentioned the case. The archive room was renovated multiple times, older files moved to a secondary storage, and case codes updated. But box hash 7448 retained its original label. The sealing tape yellowed, the paper edges curled, the red ink faded. During each inventory, staff noted briefly, condition stable. No request to reopen. Nearly 30 years later, the Evelyn Hart case had almost vanished from the Seattle Police Department's collective memory. In rookie training sessions, when unsolved cases were listed, a voice droned, "Hart, Evelyn, missing 1974, inactive." No one knew details. No one asked more. Outside, the city changed. The Fremont Bridge expanded. Gasworks Park became a tourist spot. The bag's discovery site now a stone-paved lakeside path. No trace remained of the old search. In the basement, dust settled on the old boxes. The lighting system degraded, dim yellow bulbs casting light on rusted metal shelves. Occasionally, archive staff opened the log, adding a brief note by hash 7448. No access requested. They didn't know the evidence inside remained intact. The bag, raincoat fragment, glass tube with the silver hair, all sat in darkness, awaiting new technology and a new generation. Those years brought no new investigations, no additional reports, no further leads. The Evelyn Hart case became a true cold case, frozen, forgotten, existing only as a code in the Seattle Police's internal database. A disappearance without closure and never answered. 30 years after Evelyn Hart's file was shelved in the basement, Seattle had transformed. Old streets widened, lakeside factories turned into residential areas, and the police headquarters adopted electronic archives. But in the old basement, among rusted metal shelves, hundreds of evidence boxes from half a century ago sat silently, holding unresolved cases. In 2005, the King County Sheriff's Office, with the FBI and Washington State Crime Lab, launched the Cold Case DNA Review Program, a federal initiative to re-examine archived samples using modern DNA technology. The program aimed to leverage new testing methods to cross-reference with the National CODIS database, storing DNA from millions of recorded offenders. Among the initial batch of pending cases selected, code hash 7448 appeared. A brief note read, "This Hart, missing 1974. Incomplete evidence." The file box was retrieved from storage, dusted off after over 30 years, and placed on an inventory table. Inspector Claire Donovan, 48, a new member of King County's Cold Case Unit, took charge of the review. Claire, a decade-long veteran of the Special Crimes Unit before joining the Cold Case program, was trained during the rise of forensic technology, familiar with evidence preservation and DNA analysis protocols. Holding box hash 7448, she noted Harold Cole's handwritten label, still faintly visible, no evidence of a crime, awaiting orders. She recognized the name. Cole was mentioned in internal training materials as a 1970s investigator known for meticulous evidence preservation. His care ensured many old samples remained viable. Claire opened the box, inspecting the sealed evidence, the bag, raincoat fragment, glass tube with hair and nylon bag with soil and grass. All bore original labels, though faded. She logged the unsealing, took digital photos of everything, and sorted biologically relevant samples for lab transfer. The silver hair in the glass tube was labeled 7448A, the raincoat fragment 7448B, and the soil 7,448 c. Under white light, the silver hair remained intact, its root clear, remarkably unoxidized after 3 decades. Claire placed the tube in a specialized cold container, signing the transfer log to the Washington State Crime Lab in Olympia. Alongside the hair, she sent the raincoat fragment with mud and embedded fibers for potential biological sourcing. The process followed strict modern standards, ensuring an unbroken chain of custody. At the lab, Dr. Lauren Jeffries, a senior forensic scientist, led the analysis for this project. She and her technicians used short tandem repeat DNA analysis, a new method to extract and amplify DNA from minute evidence samples, a technology unavailable to 1974 investigators like Harold Cole. The work spanned weeks. The silver hair was cleaned with an enzyme solution, its root and cell nucleus isolated for DNA extraction. A small portion of the raincoat fragment was processed concurrently for possible skin cell traces. The resulting data was encoded and run through CODIS, comparing against millions of national DNA profiles. Claire tracked the progress daily, logging each step. She didn't know if the Evelyn Hart case would yield anything new, but the box's intact seals after over 30 years were already remarkable. One June morning, the preliminary report from the Washington State Crime Lab arrived. The first line stopped Claire cold. Positive DNA match. Sample hash 7448A matches profile of Arthur Keene, born 1943, residing in Tacoma. She recognized the name instantly. The man noted in Harold Cole's report, removed from the questioning list without explanation. This time, there was no doubt. The National DNA Database confirmed a near-perfect match. 3 days later, the official report from the Washington State Crime Lab arrived at the Chief Inspector's office. The nearly 20-page document, signed by Dr. Lauren Jeffries, confirmed that the DNA extracted from the silver hair in case hash 7448 fully matched the biological profile of Arthur Keene, a 61-year-old male residing in Tacoma, Washington. The match probability was calculated at 1 in 5.7 billion, an absolute in criminal forensics. Below the conclusion, the FBI stamped a second verification, CODIS match verified by FBI, National Forensic Laboratory Division. There was no doubt about the identity of the person present at the 1974 disappearance scene. The report was sent directly to the King County Chief Inspector's office with a recommendation to reopen the investigation. The next morning, an emergency meeting was held at police headquarters. Alongside Claire and the cold case team, representatives from the prosecutor's office, forensics, and 2 federal investigators overseeing the joint program attended. On the projection screen, enlarged images of the raincoat fragment and silver hair appeared next to a 2003 ID photo of Keene, a sharp-featured man with fully white hair and deep, cold eyes. Claire summarized the progress, evidence collected at Gasworks Park in 1974, preserved intact, now matched DNA to an individual previously recorded in the federal system. When asked about reliability, the lab representative confirmed the analysis was conducted concurrently at 2 independent facilities, Washington State and FBI Quantico, yielding identical results. The investigation was officially approved to reopen the Evelyn Hart case, assigned a new code, Cold Case 05-2744. A dedicated task force of 6 was formed, based temporarily on the 3rd floor of the Seattle Police Department, where Harold Cole's office had been 3 decades earlier. Their first task was to review Keene's personal records, work history, and activities in the 1970s. Administrative databases were not yet digitized, forcing them to dig through paper files at the Public Works Department and Personnel Office. From faded records, they confirmed Keene was hired in 1972 as a site supervisor for the Rainier Road Expansion Project, the same project Evelyn had been interviewing for before her disappearance. He was described as dedicated, socially reserved, often staying late at the site. No criminal record or formal warnings existed, but a personnel file contained a crossed-out note, "Complaint for inappropriate behavior toward female staff. Internally resolved." This note caught the team's attention. Claire requested copies of all original records, including unfiled reports. They uncovered a 1974 report stating Keene was suspended for 2 weeks for improper conduct during work hours, with no details provided. The report lacked a complainant's signature, only bearing a resolved stamp. The suspension coincided with the month before Evelyn's disappearance. Meanwhile, the team traced Keene's old addresses in Queen Anne, confirming he lived alone in a rented apartment near downtown. The lease ended abruptly in early 1975, weeks after Evelyn's case was closed. The landlord, now in his 80s, recalled the tenant moving out at night, without notice, saying he was transferred. Scattered pieces of old information began to connect. The timeline showed Keene worked at the Rainier site during Evelyn's interviews, faced an internal complaint, and left DNA at Gasworks Park, where evidence was found. Claire's interim conclusion: Keene's presence at the disappearance scene was highly likely. However, they still lacked the critical link, direct contact between him and the victim on the night of the incident. To clarify, the team began re-evaluating old statements. Harold Cole's records listed 5 witnesses interviewed, 2 still alive. One was Linda Kepler, Evelyn's roommate, now living in Spokane. The other was a retired city library employee in Olympia. Both were invited to cooperate in the reinvestigation. While awaiting interviews, Claire worked with the tech team to reconstruct a 1974 spatial map of Lake Union and Gasworks, using new data from the city planning department to cross-reference the raincoat and bag locations. The 2 points were less than 800 meters apart, but on opposite sides of the lake, supporting the theory that the victim may have dropped items while fleeing. She added a note: "Need to identify Keene's nearest work site at the time." After 3 weeks, results came from the Public Works Office on November 18, 1974. Keene was assigned a night shift supervising the Rainier site, but the timesheet lacked an exit time. No manager verified his shift. His absence went unreported and unpunished. That was the night Evelyn Hart vanished. Based on circumstantial evidence and DNA, the Cold Case Task Force proposed naming Keene as an official suspect. His name was entered into the federal investigation system, marked as a high-interest subject. A request was issued to access his tax, property, and personal records. On July 12, 2005, the first reinvestigation report was completed and sent to the Seattle Police Department director. The conclusion was brief: high likelihood Arthur Keene is directly linked to Evelyn Hart's disappearance. Recommend proceeding to Phase 2, witness verification and location cross-referencing. After over 3 decades, Keene's name was tied again to a case many thought was history. This time, with undeniable DNA evidence, Evelyn Hart's file was officially revived from the cold grip of time. The administrative record review extended into early August 2005. Claire Donovan and the cold case team shifted focus to city documents, particularly 1974 construction reports. In the Seattle Transportation Department's archive, they found a 400-page technical file on the Rainier Road expansion, the project Evelyn had visited for interviews. Construction maps showed the site was less than 2 miles from the city library, close enough for a pedestrian to reach in half an hour. Keene's name appeared in the supervisor list as field engineer, tasked with monitoring progress and filing night shift reports. Each supervisor signed a logbook. Keene's signatures were consistent until mid-November, stopping abruptly on the 18th, the night Evelyn disappeared. The timesheet for that shift was torn, missing its lower half, leaving only the prior supervisor's signature. A note in blue ink, with slightly shaky handwriting, read "Inspected Northern Lakeside Area, authorship unclear." Claire requested copies of all documents and sent them to handwriting analysis to verify the signature. Meanwhile, a team member searched university library archives, finding Evelyn's old university daily articles, student and professor interviews, and a series on public spending. Among them was an unpublished carbon copy draft titled "Mismatched Numbers in the Rainier Project." In the opening, Evelyn wrote she was investigating a project item costing double its original budget, with suspicions about unclear payments. The second paragraph ended mid-sentence. According to the project engineer, Mr. Arthur K. The rest blacked out and the page corner torn. The draft was dated November 17, 1974, one day before her disappearance. This confirmed the team's belief that Evelyn planned to meet Keene again to verify information. Claire placed the draft beside the timesheet, noting their timelines aligned perfectly. The question was no longer whether Keene was involved, but why the 1975 investigation overlooked him. She decided to meet the one person who could answer, Harold Cole. He lived in suburban Tacoma, in a small hillside home. At 70, Cole had been out of the force for nearly 20 years, frail but sharp-minded. When Claire showed her badge and explained her visit, he sat silently for a long moment before nodding her inside. On the dining table, amid stacks of books and old papers, Claire saw a thick leather-bound file labeled Hart, E. Cole said he kept copies because I couldn't stand the case being shelved like it never existed. When Claire revealed the DNA matched Arthur Keene, he gripped his chair tightly. That man, he said softly. I tried to question him. They stopped me. He recounted that in early 1975, when he requested to interrogate Keene, he received a call from the administrative office demanding he halt. The caller, claiming to be from the city legal board, said Keene worked on a federally funded project, and any action involving project staff required mayoral office approval. I knew it was bureaucratic, but when your own department blocks an investigation, it's as good as dead. Claire asked if he kept any evidence. Cole rummaged through his file, pulling out a January 5, 1975, report copy stamped pending authorization in red. Below he'd handwritten, directed to stop. No official reason. In the February inventory log, he added a final note, possible covert directive to protect Arthur Keene. After hearing everything, Claire requested to copy the documents and take a witness statement. Cole agreed, adding only, I always knew I missed something. If they'd let me finish, that girl might have been found sooner. Leaving Tacoma, Claire returned to Seattle that night with the copied file. The final pieces of the old investigation now aligned with the new DNA evidence. Keene worked near the library, had direct contact with Evelyn through her interviews, and Cole's 1975 investigation was blocked by administrative orders. In the next morning's internal report, Claire wrote clearly, verification complete. Covert directive halted Arthur Keene's investigation in the Evelyn Hart case. Forensic and administrative evidence indicates Keene as the only individual present within the scene's radius on the night of the incident. Recommend advancing to witness verification phase. After 31 years, the name once crossed out in Cole's file reappeared at the top of the suspect list. This time, no one could stop the investigation from continuing. With the covert directive report approved, the Cold Case 05-2744 task force moved to the witness collection phase. The goal was to reconstruct all statements from those who interacted with Evelyn Hart in her final week, while confirming Arthur Keene's actions during that period. The old witness list was extracted from Harold Cole's records, supplemented by Claire Donovan's new findings. The first witness was Linda Kepler, Evelyn's roommate, now 55, living in Spokane. Claire and a colleague drove 4 hours to meet her. Linda vividly recalled details from the last week of November 1974. She said Evelyn seemed stressed, constantly scribbling in her notebook and making late-night calls. When Claire asked if Evelyn mentioned anyone, Linda confirmed hearing her mention Mr. Keene several times, her tone a mix of frustration and anxiety. Evelyn said he was uncooperative and kept dodging her questions about project costs. Notably, 2 days before disappearing, Evelyn said she'd try to meet Keene one last time to verify details and finish her article. Claire marked this in the report. The victim intended to meet the suspect just before vanishing. The second witness was Janet Rowe, who worked Evelyn's library shift, now retired. Janet recalled the night Evelyn left her final shift. She said, around 9 p.m., Evelyn filed her records, grabbed her bag, and mentioned she'd stop by somewhere before heading back. When Claire asked what somewhere meant, Janet recalled a vague detail. Evelyn said, "It'll just take a bit, it's not far. I'll submit the draft tomorrow morning." This suggested Evelyn may have arranged to meet someone near the library. When Claire showed Keene's photo, Janet studied it, then nodded slowly. "I saw this man at the library," he asked at the archive desk about road planning documents, "and once spoke with Evelyn at the reference tables. I remember because he was much older than the students and wore construction clothes." She was the first witness to confirm Keene's direct contact with Evelyn at the library, a detail absent from the 1974 reports. The team next contacted two workers from the 1974 Rainier site. One, Frank Doyle, now in his 70s, said he often saw Keene stay late to log reports, sometimes with documents. Asked about November 18th, Doyle thought for a moment and said, "I remember that night. A woman came to the site, not in safety gear. Light rain falling. I only glimpsed her passing the fence. Keene was talking to her near the materials shed. I assumed she was an acquaintance." Claire showed Evelyn's photo. Doyle confirmed the face looked familiar. Long hair, gray coat, yes, very similar. The second worker, Calvin Morris, confirmed that the next morning, Keene arrived late, disheveled, his raincoat muddy, offering no explanation. That day's shift log showed him signing in 2 hours late, citing equipment check. Claire recorded these details. Someone saw Keene with Evelyn at the site the night she vanished. From the statements, the task force built a model of Evelyn and Keene's interactions. Starting in early November 1974, Evelyn contacted Keene for interviews about the Rainier project's costs. Their first meeting was at the project office, the second at the library, where he provided some document copies. After that, Keene avoided contact, not responding to letters or calls. On November 18th, Evelyn left the library with her notebook, possibly to meet Keene at the site for final verification. The meeting was brief. Afterward, she was never seen again. The physical evidence, bag and raincoat fragment, was found within 2 miles of the site. To strengthen the theory, Claire directed the tech team to reconstruct Keene's movements in November 1974. She gathered payroll records, timesheets, and material delivery logs from Public Works. They confirmed Keene worked continuously from November 1st to 17, mostly night shifts. On the 18th, the disappearance night, no entry or exit data existed. On the 19th, he submitted a late report without verification. 3 days later, he took a week's sick leave. Upon returning, Keene requested a transfer from the Rainier site, citing personal reasons. Records showed he moved to a technical office, never returning to the site. This abrupt break aligned perfectly with Evelyn's disappearance timeline. The task force also reviewed vehicle records and driver's licenses from the period, discovering that Keene owned a brown 1973 Ford F-100. It was a small pickup truck commonly used for hauling materials, matching a 1974 witness report of a brown truck parked near the library that night. This new data strengthened the link between Keene, the construction site, and the crime scene. When all statements were compiled, Claire presented at an internal meeting, "We have 3 independent witnesses placing Keene and Evelyn in the same time frame, and Keene's behavior afterward is inconsistent with his work routine. All evidence points in one direction." The report concluded with a formal proposal: proceed to the next phase, reconstructing the victim's route on the night of November 18, 1974, based on witness statements and construction records. 31 years after Evelyn's disappearance, memories thought faded were woven into a logical chain. Those who stood with her in the library, at the construction site, or in the dorm, became living pieces of an old puzzle. Amid the shaky signatures of witnesses, Arthur Keene's name stood out as the starting point, and perhaps the end point, of a disappearance spanning over 3 decades. After completing the witness interviews, the Cold Case 05-2744 Task Force moved to the next step, reconstructing the victim's route on the night of November 18, 1974. Under Inspector Claire Donovan's direction, the data tech team collaborated with the Seattle City Planning Department to restore 1970s maps of downtown infrastructure and traffic. Old paper maps were digitized, overlaid onto current GPS systems to identify roads, pedestrian paths, bridges, and construction sites from that era. The reconstructed map showed 3 possible routes from the city library to the Rainier construction site. The main route via Pike Street South, a shortcut through the Fremont Bridge around Lake Union, and a secondary route via internal construction roads. Based on witness statements from the coffee shop and Janet Rowe at the library, Evelyn left the library around 9 p.m., heading northeast toward the lake, aligning with the second route. Her bag was found near the Fremont Bridge on that path, while the raincoat fragment was at Gasworks Park, across the lake. Both points formed a small arc around the Rainier construction site where Arthur Keene worked that night. When plotted on the reconstructed map, a hypothetical route emerged. Evelyn left the library, stopped at the coffee shop, then headed toward Lake Union, likely to meet Keene near Gasworks. The team analyzed timing based on average walking speed and that night's weather: light rain, wet wind, slick roads. From the library to the meeting point at the site took about 35–40 minutes on foot. If Evelyn left at 9 p.m., she could have reached the area around 9:40 p.m. Keene's shift report noted his presence at the site from 8 p.m., with no recorded exit time, perfectly aligning with when Evelyn could have arrived. Claire requested the tech team to build a 3D simulation model using the old map, integrating the timeline with found evidence: the bag at Fremont Bridge, 1.2 miles west of the site; the raincoat fragment at Gasworks, just 300 meters from the site. The distance suggested the items weren't dropped randomly, but likely discarded intentionally to mislead. The team considered 2 scenarios. 1. Evelyn met Keene at the site, was attacked, and the perpetrator took her bag, discarding it at the Fremont Bridge to stage the scene. 2. Evelyn left the library, was forced into a vehicle near the lake, and taken to the site. Both theories pointed to the Rainier construction site. From old maps, Claire noted the area lacked solid fencing then, only temporary wire mesh, with containers for materials and machinery inside. If the incident occurred there, only Keene had nighttime access. She directed forensics to re-examine 1974 crime scene photos, comparing the bridge railing where the bag was found to Lake Union's terrain. A surprising finding emerged: wind and water currents at the Fremont Bridge moved east to west, making it unlikely the bag was blown or dropped naturally. For it to be found where it was, someone had to place it on the railing from the roadside, not the lake. Evidence of scene staging grew clearer. Based on this, Claire drafted a preliminary conclusion for the task force leader. The victim was likely lured or forced to the construction site, where Arthur Keene worked on November 18, 1974. Current evidence suggests deliberate staging to mislead the investigation. She then convened an internal meeting to align on next steps. The plan had 3 parts. 1. Verify physical evidence, search for additional traces at the old construction site, now a residential area. 2. Cross-reference old witness statements with map data, especially the taxi driver and construction workers' accounts. 3. Gather administrative evidence, shift records, material delivery logs, and container transport maps from November 1974 to trace material movements from the site. Claire worked with the city's legal department to obtain a search warrant for the old materials storage area and contacted Planning Archives for original site blueprints. While the tech team modeled the route, Claire revisited Harold Cole's old notes. One previously overlooked line stood out: suspect may have used a Ford truck to transport evidence. It matched new transportation data. Keene owned a brown Ford F-100. That note, after 30 years, became the first circumstantial evidence supporting the theory that Evelyn was moved by that vehicle. The evidence verification plan was finalized the next week, including a test excavation at the former container site. Presenting to command, Claire concluded her summary: all routes and evidence converge on one point: Arthur Keene. For the first time since 1974, Evelyn Hart's final path was clear from the city library, through the Fremont Bridge, around Lake Union, ending at the dark construction site where all traces vanished. Seattle police had their first complete theory of that night, and with it, a plan to pursue the truth began. After the preliminary conclusion that Evelyn was likely lured to the site, the cold case 05-2744 task force shifted to suspect surveillance. Tax and residency records showed Arthur Keene now lived in Helena, Montana, retired, working part-time as a construction consultant. He lived alone in a suburban wooden house in a quiet neighborhood near Helena National Forest. Montana State Police and the FBI coordinated a weeks-long covert surveillance plan to gather more physical evidence, ensuring legal compliance before requesting an arrest warrant. The surveillance team, 2 federal agents and 2 King County officers, was dispatched to Helena. They rented a house 500 meters from Keene's, setting up long-range cameras aimed at his garage. Keene followed a routine early mornings, fetching the newspaper, walking the neighborhood, then driving an old gray pickup to the supermarket or church. Neighbors described him as polite, quiet, fond of gardening, not close with anyone. None knew he was once linked to a student's disappearance 30 years prior. During surveillance, agents were authorized to collect indirect DNA samples, a legal method in cold case investigations. One early October morning, as the garbage truck arrived, federal agents and sanitation workers swapped Keene's bin with an FBI-controlled one. All weekly household waste, paper coffee cups, and old toothbrush, tissues, was sealed and sent to the Washington State Crime Lab for DNA extraction. Results arrived after 10 days, the report stated. DNA from the toothbrush matches 100% with the DNA from exhibit hash 7448A. Match probability, 1 in 7.2 billion. The conclusion was concise. Absolute match. Recommend urgent action. Claire Donovan received the report, signed it, and immediately contacted the King County prosecutor to initiate a search warrant and federal arrest warrant. To ensure legality, Claire and an FBI legal advisor drafted a document detailing the evidence chain, preserved 1974 evidence, modern DNA analysis, dual independent matches, and Keene's irregular behavior in November 1974. The 80-page file was submitted to the Seattle Federal Judge's Office. In an internal review, the judge approved both warrants, citing scientific evidence sufficient to confirm the suspect's presence at the scene of Evelyn Hart's disappearance. While awaiting formal warrant transfer to Montana, Claire and the task force finalized the arrest plan. The goal was to approach Keene at home, avoiding public spaces to minimize risk. On the night of October 14, 2005, Helena's sky was veiled in thin fog, streetlights sparse, and wind from the forest carried pine resin. At 10:30 p.m., 4 unmarked vehicles parked a few hundred meters from Keene's house. A lookout team confirmed he'd just turned off the living room light, leaving only a faint kitchen glow. At 10:45 p.m., the clear signal was given, and the task force swiftly crossed the yard, surrounding the back exit. A loud knock rang out. Federal authorities, search warrant. No response. After 30 seconds, the wooden door opened from within. Keene appeared in a dark sweater, hair disheveled, face expressionless. The arrest warrant was read aloud, with a preliminary charge of involvement in a 1974 Seattle disappearance, suspected homicide. He didn't resist, only asking, 30 years later, you still remember, before silently allowing handcuffs. During the search, police found old items in a storage room. A sealed wooden box containing a University of Washington student ID, with Evelyn Hart's name, an unprocessed 35mm film roll, and a November 17, 1974, University Daily newspaper, the day before her disappearance. In a desk drawer, they recovered an old black-and-white photo of the Rainier site, with a woman's silhouette in the background, facing away. All new evidence was sealed and flown to Seattle, with the suspect via federal transport. As the escort vehicle left Helena, Claire Donovan gazed through the window, watching the wooden house fade into the fog. In her mind, the Evelyn Hart case was no longer an old file. It was the first official arrest of the cold case DNA review program. The next day in Seattle, the forensic results were internally announced. DNA from Keene's toothbrush perfectly matched the 1974 hair sample, ruling out coincidence. The King County prosecutor upgraded the charge to homicide, first degree. In the report, Claire wrote the final line, 31 years later, biological evidence has brought Arthur Keene back to where he left, before justice. At dawn on October 15, 2005, the convoy escorting Arthur Keene left Helena's airport in thick fog, heading north to transfer the suspect to Seattle police, under a federal indictment. On the road, Keene remained silent, staring out the window, his face nearly expressionless. When read his Miranda rights, he gave a brief nod, offering no objections or questions. By noon, the convoy reached the King County Police headquarters. He was taken to the third-floor interrogation room, where 30 years earlier, Harold Cole had written the first reports on Evelyn Hart's case. Meanwhile, the task force in Helena continued a detailed search of Keene's home under the federally approved warrant. The small, isolated house had 3 bedrooms, filled with old items, everything neatly arranged as if barely lived in. Police inspected from the garage to the basement, photographing and logging every area. The living room displayed old construction maps and a 1973 Seattle Public Works commendation frame. In a wooden cabinet against the wall, they found an oak document box with a rusted lock, hidden behind stacks of technical books. When pried open, it contained items wrapped in brown wax paper, arranged in rows like an archive. The first item was a University of Washington student ID, featuring a portrait of a brunette female student, Evelyn Hart, with a card number matching the university's 1974 records. Though faded, the signature was still legible. Beneath the next layer of wrapping paper was a 35mm negative film roll, carefully coiled in an old Kodak metal canister. When held under light, the tech team saw images of a woman's silhouette by a wire fence, holding a notebook matching the witness description of Evelyn at the construction site that night. Beside it was a typed article copy titled Mismatched Numbers in the Rainier Project. On the first page, red ink crossed out the interviewee's name, and in the margin, scrawled handwriting noted, "Never published." All evidence was sealed, coded per federal protocol, and sent to the Seattle Forensics Lab. When Claire Donovan received the evidence box, she knew they had touched the missing piece of the case, items Harold Cole never had the chance to see. Keene's possession of Evelyn's student ID for over 30 years was no coincidence. It was not just evidence, but a trace of control, proof of a direct link between the perpetrator and the victim. That same day, Arthur Keene was detained at King County Jail in a segregated federal section. The first interrogation was scheduled that afternoon, attended by Claire Donovan, the county prosecutor, and an FBI agent. The small interrogation room was lit with harsh white light, reflecting off the metal table. Keene sat upright, hands neatly in front, showing no fear or defensiveness. When asked about the items found at his home, he looked directly at Claire, his voice raspy. "I didn't kill anyone. She came to see me, that's all." Claire pressed him to explain the student ID and Evelyn's article. Keene claimed Evelyn left them at the site office after an interview, and he kept them as a memento. When asked why he didn't turn them over, he fell silent. The prosecutor read the DNA results, stating the 1974 hair matched his biological profile perfectly. Keene didn't dispute it, only saying slowly, "I worked there, my hair could have gotten caught somewhere. But I didn't do anything to her." The interrogation lasted over 3 hours. Keene admitted meeting Evelyn on the night of November 18th, but denied any violence. He said she came to the site to ask more questions. They argued about her demanding budget records, and she left alone. He claimed he never saw her again. When asked why he didn't report her disappearance, Keene looked at the table, saying softly, "Because I knew no one would believe me." During the interrogation, forensics began analyzing the negative film. After developing, they found 8 clear frames, 6 of the construction site, two showing Evelyn talking to a man in a dark raincoat, resembling Keene. Background analysis indicated the photos were taken at night, with vehicle headlights reflecting, matching the materials shed area described by witness Frank Doyle. The photos, student ID and unpublished article, were quickly listed as critical evidence, numbered 052,744, EX1 to EX3. The supplemental report noted, these items could not be in the subject's possession without direct contact with the victim on the night of the incident. When the interrogation ended, Keene was returned to his cell. Claire stepped out of the room, standing by the hallway's glass window, looking down at Seattle's lit-up downtown. In her mind she saw Harold Cole, blocked from investigating 30 years ago. Now the final evidence had surfaced, and the man Cole suspected from the start was detained in the same building where the case was once closed. That evening, she wrote the final line in her work log. Direct physical evidence linking Arthur Keene to victim Evelyn Hart confirmed. Subject detained without resistance. Demeanor detached. Denies guilt. Case officially moves to prosecution phase. 31 years after Evelyn vanished, what was buried in darkness returned to light. Not as theory, but as hard evidence. Seattle, the cold, rainy city of old, finally had an answer to the disappearance it had once forgotten. 2 days after Arthur Keene's detention at King County Jail, a second interrogation was held. This time, alongside Inspector Claire Donovan and the county prosecutor, Keene's appointed attorney and an FBI observer were present. The interrogation room's atmosphere was heavy, cold white light glaring, the recorder clicking softly as it started. Keene sat upright, hands on the table, his gaze distant. He showed no tension from the first session, only a weary resignation. Claire began, keeping her tone neutral. Mr. Keene, we know you met Miss Hart on the night of November 18, 1974. You confirmed that. But the items found at your home suggest the encounter wasn't just a normal exchange. Do you want to add anything about that night? Keene sat silent for a long moment, fingers tapping lightly on the metal table. Finally, he looked up, voice hoarse. She did come. I don't deny that. He recounted that, while checking the materials shed that night, Evelyn appeared with her notebook and camera. She wanted to discuss discrepancies in the project's budget reports. She was smart and stubborn, Keene said. She thought I was hiding something. I tried explaining, but she wouldn't listen. They argued heatedly. Keene admitted, grabbing Evelyn's arm to pull her from the storage area, fearing she'd get hurt, but she broke free, slipped, and hit her head on a steel block nearby. He paused, took a deep breath, eyes fixed on the table. She lay still, didn't wake up. I didn't know what to do. Claire asked, did you call for help or notify the supervisor? Keene shook his head. He said he checked her pulse. She was breathing faintly, but he feared if he called police, they'd assume he attacked her. Back then, a single rumor could ruin a career, he said, voice breaking. In panic, he moved her into a material storage container, planning to return the next morning to take her to a hospital. But that night, the project's transport company arrived early to move the container lot to a southern city yard. I didn't know they'd come so soon, Keene said. When I heard the truck, I ran out, but the container was sealed and loaded. He said he watched the truck leave the site, unable to stop it. Claire asked why he didn't report it afterward. Keene admitted he planned to but was scared. He thought no one would believe it was an accident. I knew people suspected me. She'd been to City Hall, asking about me. If I said she died at the site, they'd convict me on the spot. The next morning, he returned, but the container was gone from the inventory. When Claire asked if he knew where it went, Keene replied, probably the South Park material yard, where old containers were stored before sorting. The answer prompted Claire to jot it down quickly. For the first time in 31 years, someone had pointed to a specific location that might hold Evelyn Hart's remains. The prosecutor pressed repeatedly about the container's movement. Keene explained that the transport system was manual, containers numbered with paint, No electronic codes. "I remember the number," he said. "It was 17 by white paint on the door." I never forgot. He recounted that years later, hearing news of police suspicions about her disappearance, he visited the South Park yard, but it was closed and under new ownership. "I stood outside the fence, didn't dare ask," Keene said, voice slowing. "I knew it was over that night." Claire, keeping calm, asked, "You say she was unconscious, but you weren't sure she was dead?" Keene shook his head. "I don't know, maybe she was just out. I thought I'd come back to save her. But the container was gone, and I had no way." She asked why he kept Evelyn's ID and article for decades. He replied, "I found them in her notebook left at the table. I kept them as a reminder. I couldn't throw them away. I thought one day the police would come, and maybe they did." When the statement concluded, Keene requested a brief break. He sat still, hands clasped, gaze distant. His lawyer tried to halt the session, but the prosecutor insisted on continuing to record details about the container yard's exact location. Keene agreed to cooperate, providing an old map he kept in his home's technical files. The map detailed the South Park Industrial Yard, where Rainier project materials were stored in 1974. He described it as near the Duwamish River, with 3 container rows, each holding over 20 units, mostly abandoned. The 17B number he mentioned was in the eastern row, near a steel fence. The interrogation report was completed at 6:10 p.m. Spanning over 20 pages, signed by Keene and 2 federal investigators. At the end, he wrote a short note. "I didn't mean to kill her. I was scared and wrong. If they find her, please bury her properly." Claire read the note silently, nodding to the prosecutor to confirm the session's end. As Keene was let out, she watched the silver-haired man shuffle down the long hallway, his shadow stretching across the tiles like 30 years of torment. That evening, the Cold Case Task Force held an emergency meeting to plan an excavation at the South Park Industrial Yard based on Keene's information. In the summary report, Claire wrote, "Subject admits contact with the victim, actions leading to her unconsciousness, and concealing her in container 17B. Next objective, verify statement through field excavation." After months of investigation, the Evelyn Hart case was nearing its end, not with theories, but with the confession of the man who made her vanish. 2 days after Keene signed his statement, the Cold Case 05-2744 Task Force received a warrant for inspection and excavation at the South Park Industrial Yard. Industrial records from the 1970s were retrieved from the City Planning Department, many decayed with faded ink. Under archive room lights, Claire Donovan and the tech team traced 1974 Public Works hand-drawn maps to locate the container area. One old map had a faint pencil note, "Storage Yard, Duwamish Riverside." Beside it was the 17B marker, matching Keene's statement. The South Park Yard was now managed by a new logistics company, much of it paved over with concrete. However, a southeastern corner, once the old material storage, remained undeveloped, about 50 meters from the Duwamish River. When the task force arrived, the ground was covered in knee-high weeds, scattered with rusted containers stacked atop each other. Among them, one row bore old white-painted markings, faint but legible, row B. On October 20, 2005, the excavation began at 6 a.m. The entire area was cordoned off, covered with tents, and equipped with lighting systems. The forensic team used magnetic scanners and ground-penetrating radar to detect metal objects buried beneath the mud. After nearly an hour of scanning, the screen displayed a large box-like structure, 1.5 meters underground, matching the dimensions of a 20-foot container. The strongest signal came from the eastern corner of row B, exactly as Keene described. Workers used an excavator to remove the topsoil, then the forensic team dug manually. The smell of rusted metal and damp earth hung thickly. By midday, a shovel struck steel, producing a dull thud. A container section emerged, covered in green moss and black mud. The door was half buried, its rusted lock fused shut. After photographing the scene, a technician cut the lock with a thermal saw, and the door swung open, releasing a heavy stench of moldy decay. Inside, a flashlight beam revealed rotted construction materials, wooden planks, coiled wire, and amid them, a curled human skeleton with broken ribs and a tilted skull. Scattered around were dark fabric scraps, a mud-caked nylon raincoat piece, and a metal wristwatch stopped at 9:46. The team stood silent for a few seconds. Claire stepped forward, signaled a lockdown, and called for forensics to document the scene. Every detail was photographed, measured, and coordinated. The raincoat fragment matched the material of Exhibit Hash 7448B, collected near Gasworks Park in 1974. The watch, retrieved from the mud, bore a faint engraving, EH, matching the description of Evelyn's watch, reported missing in the initial 1974 report. Near the arm bones was a small fabric cord, likely the remnant of a coat belt. The remains were carefully collected, sealed, and sent to the Washington State Crime Lab. Bone samples were taken to compare DNA with the Hart family's profile in the national database. A week later, results confirmed the bones fully matched Evelyn Hart's DNA. Signed by Dr. Lauren Jeffries, the report concluded, identity confirmed. Remains found at South Park are those of Evelyn Hart, female, 22, missing November 1974. The detailed forensic report described the remains: no knife or bullet marks, broken ribs from impact, no post-mortem violence. Final conclusion: cause of death, asphyxiation, due to oxygen deprivation in a confined space. Oxidation traces and body position indicated the victim was alive when placed in the container and died within hours. When Claire received the report, she sat long in her office, staring at the final page where cause of death, asphyxiation, was bolded. 31 years ago, Harold Cole wrote in his notebook, "She vanished between two rains." Now the story closed with a simple, chilling truth. Evelyn wasn't killed by violence, but buried alive in fear and silence. On October 27th, all evidence from the container, watch, raincoat fragment, soil, bones, was cataloged and entered into the cold case evidence system. At a King County meeting, Claire presented findings to police leadership and the prosecutor. The presentation had three parts: DNA evidence chain, Keen's statements, and forensic results. All pointed to one fact: Evelyn Hart died of asphyxiation inside container 17B at the Rainier site, with engineer Arthur Keen directly responsible. The prosecutor requested further verification of the 1974 container transport process to finalize the case. The team traced the defunct transport company, finding records in the state archives. A November 19, 1974, log stated, container 17B, moved from Rainier site to South Park Yard, 2210. This entry was the final piece, aligning with Keen's confession and the time on the watch found with the remains. That evening, Claire left headquarters late. Outside, Seattle was raining again. She paused by the 10th floor window, watching raindrops slide down the glass, just like the night she first read file hash 7448. Now, the case the city forgot had an answer. A hair, a map, a faded number on a container. Together, they formed the truth. On October 30th, the comprehensive report was signed and sent to the King County Prosecutor's Office, concluding, victim identity confirmed by DNA testing, physical evidence linked to suspect Arthur Keen, cause of death asphyxiation in container 17B, post-incident behavior, concealing the body and failing to report. After 3 decades, Evelyn Hart's file, hash 7448, was officially closed with Claire Donovan's signature. The 1974 disappearance became a resolved homicide. In the archive, the old evidence box was opened one last time to add a new label note. Recovered and resolved, October 2005. The forensic report from the Washington State Crime Lab closed the excavation phase and opened the final stage of the case. On November 2, 2005, the Cold Case 05-2744 Task Force completed the comprehensive investigation file on Evelyn Hart, including all scientific evidence, witness statements, physical exhibits, and forensic results. The 300-page file, coded homicide, case reopened, was signed by Inspector Claire Donovan, the case lead. Investigators spent 3 days reviewing every detail, ensuring all evidence met legal standards, from the 1974 silver hair to DNA results. Items found in Keene's home, his confession, and the remains confirmed at South Park. In the summary report to the King County Prosecutor's Office, the team recommended charging Arthur Keene with 2 counts: manslaughter by reckless conduct causing death under RCW 9.32.070 of Washington state law, concealing and destroying a body under RCW 9.844.130, for knowingly failing to report a live or deceased victim, and intentionally hiding the scene. The prosecutor reviewed the documents within 72 hours. They agreed the scientific evidence surpassed reasonable doubt, absolute DNA match, victims' items in the suspect's possession, a confession aligning with container transport data, and forensics confirming death by asphyxiation in a confined space, consistent with Keene's account. Though he claimed it was an accident, failing to report and concealing the body for over 30 years constituted criminal acts. On November 6, 2005, the formal indictment was issued. Case number 05-CR1187 KC. Arthur Keene was charged with the above counts, plus an aggravating factor of intentionally concealing evidence to evade prosecution. The King County Court approved detention without bail due to the case's severity and flight risk. Prosecutors noted the charges, especially concealing a body and obstructing justice, had no statute of limitations under state law. In the following days, the Seattle Police Administrative Team began digitizing all old and new case files, marking this as the first cold case prosecution via DNA technology in the King County FBI collaboration. Original evidence, bag, raincoat fragment, hair, watch, container, was transferred to a federal storage facility in Olympia for permanent preservation. A copy of file hash 7448 was provided to the Hart family through their legal counsel. On November 9, an internal press briefing was held at Seattle Police Headquarters. Claire Donovan briefly presented the investigation's outcome, thanking forensics and partnering agencies. In the meeting minutes, she stated, "Justice can be delayed, but never lost. A single piece of evidence can lead us back to where it began." Beside her, the prosecutor confirmed the preliminary trial would open in early 2006. That day, at King County Jail, Keene was informed of the indictment. He listened quietly, then told his lawyer, "I've said all I remember. They can judge me however they want." The lawyer signed the notice without comment. For the investigators, his words no longer mattered. The evidence was complete, leaving no gaps in the case's logic. As Claire closed the final file, she saw Harold Cole's faded 1975 signature on the old label. Noting, "Insufficient evidence to determine a crime," she added in black pen below, "Case closed." Homicide confirmed, November 2005. After 31 years, those final words closed not just a file, but a long stretch of time when a young woman was forgotten in a rainy city. Seattle had changed, but in its archives, a cold case was warmed by truth. On March 12, 2006, Arthur Keene's trial opened at the King County Courthouse, Washington's largest criminal court. The courtroom was packed with reporters, law students, and federal cold case program members who saw it as the first model case of post-2000s DNA forensics. The prosecution was led by King County Prosecutor Samuel Price. The defense had 2 court-appointed lawyers. In the front row sat the Hart family. Evelyn's white-haired mother, flanked by her 2 sons, clutching a restored photo of Evelyn from the case file. The first morning, the prosecution presented the evidence chain. They began with the DNA report. The 1974 silver hair perfectly matched Keen's profile, confirming his presence at Gasworks Park, where Evelyn's raincoat fragment was found. Next came physical evidence: the student ID, unpublished article, film negatives, and watch engraved with EH, all found in Keen's home, displayed on a large courtroom screen. The prosecution stressed not one of these items could exist without direct contact between Keen and the victim. During the witness phase, Inspector Claire Donovan took the stand. She detailed the reinvestigation, describing how STR technology matched CODIS data. She stated clearly, if Harold Cole had this technology in 1974, the case would have been solved in months. But evidence doesn't vanish. It waits for the right time to be heard. Her words silenced the courtroom. Then Dr. Lauren Jeffries presented forensic results: death by asphyxiation in a sealed container, no post-mortem assault. She spoke slowly. She lived a few hours after being placed in the steel box. No one opened the door. In the afternoon, the prosecution displayed the reconstructed map of Evelyn's route the night she vanished, evidence locations, and images of the South Park yard, where container 17B was found. The courtroom fell silent as the excavated container appeared: rusted steel, mud-encrusted, with a curled skeleton inside. The prosecution concluded, this wasn't a disappearance, it was a death hidden in silence for 31 years. The defense didn't dispute the evidence, but argued Keen lacked intent to kill, claiming the death was accidental. They emphasized his panic and fear, not deliberate harm. However, his subsequent actions, failing to report, keeping evidence, concealing the body, undermined their case. On the second day, Keen testified. He stood slowly, hands trembling slightly. His voice was low, hoarse. I made the biggest mistake of my life. I didn't mean to kill her, but I let her die. He confirmed his prior statements, not contesting the forensic findings. When the prosecution asked, did you know the container was moved that night? Keen nodded. I knew, but I was too scared. I thought if I stayed quiet, it would fade. That statement closed the cross-examination. The trial lasted 3 days. On March 15th, the jury delivered the verdict. Arthur Keen was guilty of manslaughter by reckless conduct and concealing a body. Under Washington state law, the court sentenced him to life imprisonment without parole. Keen showed no reaction, only bowing his head, hands gripping the rail before the defendant's stand. The Hart family quietly embraced, no one crying, as if tears had run dry after 3 decades of waiting. Post-trial, the Seattle police held a press conference announcing the Evelyn Hart case's closure. On the podium, the SPD director stated, thanks to DNA technology and the cold case unit's efforts, justice was served for the victim after 31 years. Beside him, Claire Donovan and Dr. Jeffries received commendations for solving Seattle's oldest surviving cold case. A press release went out that afternoon. The Evelyn Hart case, missing since 1974, was resolved through modern DNA techniques, marking a milestone in the city's investigative history. Local papers ran headlines, and TV stations aired special reports on the case's resolution. Police departments across the state sent congratulations and requested technical process details. In the following months, SPD launched an evidence storage overhaul. All 1960s, 1980s files were reviewed, digitized, and biological samples preserved in new cold storage standards. The cold case unit received dedicated funding, named the Hart Initiative after the victim, with the motto, "No evidence is meaningless." By late 2006, with the system upgraded, Claire Donovan returned to the old basement where Harold Cole once stored box hash 7448. The metal shelves were replaced with modern cold storage units, each evidence box tagged with a QR code. On the first shelf, box hash 7448 remained, its label updated, case closed, solved by DNA, 2005. Claire placed her hand on the lid, whispering, "We found you, Evelyn." Outside, Seattle's persistent rain fell, the same rain that hid secrets for over 30 years. This time, It fell on a changed city, where justice was no longer just on paper, but lived in every small piece of evidence preserved from the past. In SPD's cold case database, the final entry for #7448 was logged. Evelyn Hart, missing 1974. Resolved 2005. Homicide confirmed. 31 years, one silver hair, and the persistence of those who refuse to let memory rest, all closed Seattle's oldest case and opened a new chapter for justice. The Evelyn Hart case, a disappearance thought forgotten for over 30 years, is not just a story of restored justice, but a profound reminder for American society today about the value of persistence, technology, and professional ethics in the modern era. In this story, a single silver hair overlooked in a 1974 evidence bag became the key to unlocking the case through 2005 DNA technology. It's proof that no matter how much time passes, truth can be found if people respect evidence and refuse to abandon responsibility. Evelyn Hart's story echoes thousands of unsolved cases across America, where a small lapse in storage, a misguided administrative decision, or an individual's lack of courage can delay justice for decades. Harold Cole, the old inspector, represents a generation of police limited by technology and political pressures, while Claire Donovan, the 2005 investigator, symbolizes a new era where science, transparency, and determination brought justice back. The lesson isn't just for investigators, but for everyone. Every small action, every piece of data, every shred of evidence, no matter how minor, holds immense value if preserved with responsibility and conscience. In today's American society, where trust in the legal system is sometimes tested, Evelyn Hart's story reminds us that justice is never lost. It waits for those daring enough to step forward and rekindle what's right, however late. If you believe justice, though delayed, is worth finding, subscribe to our channel to follow more cold cases revived by the light of truth. Thank you for joining Evelyn Hart's story. See you in the next video, where we continue exploring secrets hidden by time.